I feel out of place. Yellow Rose is up next on Rediscovered Movies. Hello, welcome to Rediscovered Movies. I'm your host, Nomfanelo. So, with today's episode, I will be focusing on Yellow Rose. Yellow Rose is a 2019 musical drama film that's based on the short film of the same name. So, the film is directed and co-written by Diane Paragas, who's known for directing films such as Brooklyn Boheme and The Unstoppable. The film is co-written by Annie J. Howell and Selena Cipuraso. Apologies if I mispronounced it. The film stars Eva Noblezada, Princess Punzalan, and Dale Watson. So the film focuses on a Filipina teen who must decide whether to stay with her family or leave her small town to become a country singer. The film premiered at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival on May 2nd, 2019. It was released in theaters on October 9th, 2020. In terms of box office, it made over $11.2 million worldwide. Domestically, it opened at number 9 opening weekend with $150,330. It was beaten by films including Tenet and The War with Grandpa. In terms of critical reception, on Rotten Tomatoes it has a 87% critic score, where they say, a coming-of-age story with a timely twist, Yellow Rose offers a fresh and sweetly rewarding perspective on the immigrant experience. The audience gave it 77%. It won 2 awards at the Toronto Real Asian Film Festival, including Best Feature Film. At the time of this recording, it is streaming on Netflix and is available on demand, so check your local provider. All right, let's get into first discoveries. So, at some point, I was just browsing on Netflix in terms of films to watch, and I stumbled across this one. So after reading a synopsis, I'm like, oh, this sounds interesting. I'll check it out. So I added it to my watch list. And when the time came to work on this season of the podcast, I decided, you know what? I'll add this movie to the list and check it out. And after watching it for the first time, I quite enjoyed it. It was a fine movie. Because I'm just glad that in terms of like musical drama movies, like it doesn't follow the typical cliches. Because with this movie, it really follows the protagonist essentially trying to get by as opposed to doing whatever it takes to be a country singer, which you'll see in a lot of musical movies, particularly of the ones that I covered previously in this podcast. So, yeah, like it could have been better here and there in terms of the script, but I thought overall it was quite enjoyable to watch. So, let's get into the highlights. So, the highlight for me that stands out is the music. Because I like so essentially this is country music. I'm not a big country music fan, but I have learned to appreciate the genre throughout the years. And I find like with the music here, it definitely has an Americana feel to it because the music is more has a folk vibe, bluegrass vibe, and it doesn't try to be commercial with the music because it seems with the filmmakers they wanted the songs to have a more low key or grounded approach, which is nice. And with the songs for me that stood out were Square Peg, which Rose plays several times in the movie. Circumstance and Quietly Into Night, which those ones she sings with Dale in the movie. And Rose, I like Rose in this movie because essentially with her, she got into music, I guess, because of her father who passed away. And she is particularly shy to play music for everyone else. But I just liked how, as the movie progressed, she finally builds up the courage to perform in front of others. Because I do get that when you are making your own music, you always like worried about what is the reception going to be, which is probably one of the reasons why Rose is shy to share music to others, I imagine. So yeah, which is great that she was able to build her confidence as the film progresses. And it's quite heartbreaking to see her like keep bouncing from home to home because of her mom's situation with ice, because she gets placed in different homes, like we saw like with Gail with her aunt. And then when that doesn't work out, she lives at the Broken Spoke bar, and then at Dale Watson's place, and then finally she lands at a motel through her cleaning job as a maid. So I'm just glad at the end she was finally able to settle down, and hopefully at some point she finds her own place. And I would say, yeah, like the performances from the cast were solid. For me, the ones that stood out were Eva Noblezada as Rose, obviously, and with Princess Punzalan as Priscilla, so mother and daughter. And in terms of scenes, so as I mentioned with Square Peg, Rose frequently sings it throughout the film. I would say like my one of my favorite moments with that song is when Rose is working on that song in the bedroom, I believe during the first act of the movie, because clearly here it's in the rough stages, but she eventually gets into the groove of things until her mother Priscilla intervenes, asking if she's done her schoolwork. And also to another moment with that song, she sings the song to her cousin, I believe, and the cousin seems to enjoy it, even though she's little. But but yeah, that was a cute scene. Also, too, when Rose overhears Gail singing to her daughter, is really interesting with the cinematography, or with the lighting in particular, because when Gail's in the bedroom, the daughter, it's very light, has a warm environment, while when she's sitting at the hallway, it's very dark, cold, like to show that Rose is isolated, even amongst her family members. So that was an interesting choice. Also, too, interesting moment. So after when Rose visits Priscilla from ICE, she goes back to Dale's place, and you be think that, oh, she when she grabs a whiskey bottle, she's going to, use it to drink her sorrows away, because it's a tough situation that she's going through. But nope, she decides to place the bottle elsewhere, and grabs her notebook and starts writing music with Dale. So that was an interesting choice. And I would say too, there's a shot when Rose is in her bedroom in the first act where we see a shot of these prayer candles. I don't know if they're actually prayer candles, but I always see them typically used for prayer candles. But essentially, with the candles, it shows a picture of Prince and Dolly Parton, which is interesting because I imagine for Rose, those are probably some of her musical influences. So that was quite fascinating. And that pretty much sums up my highlights of this movie. Now, in terms of lowlights, let's talk about Priscilla. So, Priscilla, we see throughout the movie, wants Rose, to stay in school, do her homework, stay out of bad behavior, which is fine. But the thing is, she refuses to tell Rose about Ice, which I'm wondering why, because if she knows that the situation is going to get worse, it'll be nice for Priscilla to give Rose the heads up, but it makes you wonder, like, did Priscilla refuse to say anything? Is it because of shame or guilt? But we don't know, but it would have been nice for her to have said something before it got worse. And I wonder too, like what happened with Gail and Priscilla's relationship. So Gail and Priscilla, they are siblings, they're sisters, and so they came together, I believe, from the Philippines, but they led different lives because we see with Priscilla, she is living more in a, let's say, a lower class situation because she stays at the motel through her cleaning job with Rose. While with Gail, she is married, has a daughter, lives comfortable. I'm not sure if she's a housewife, but based on the scenes that we've seen, it suggests that she is. And it seems like with Gail, like she always has to ask her husband Mark for stuff, which is, I guess, kind of weird, but I'll get into that bit a bit later. So it just makes you wonder why they drifted apart. Like, I get because different lives, but was there something specific that led to them not speaking to each other or something? I have no clue what it is. And with Mark, Gail's husband, why does he not want Rose to stay? Because you figured that if a family member is in trouble, you do what you can to help them out, unless if it's one of those situations where the person in trouble always gets into trouble intentionally and you can't have that baggage, included in your life. So it's the film implies that he doesn't want to get involved with ICE because with Gail, if she is, let's say, illegal herself, because she might get into trouble. But it's possible that through marriage to Mark that she's okay with this. I'm not too sure about the legal specifics on that. And yeah, because I don't think Mark is racist. I think he just doesn't want trouble because of ICE and all that stuff. But I don't know. I just felt like in this movie he was a jerk, basically. Also, too, let's talk about Elliot and Rose's relationship. So it seems clear that they are friends because they go out together to the bar, the Broken Spoke, where they see Dale Watson perform. They have a good time and all that stuff. But it seems like if Elliot, he wants something more out of the relationship, because it's interesting that when they are at the Broken Spoke together, she asks, "Oh, where is everybody?" Like, because there were supposed to be other people with them, and he said something along the lines that, "Oh, they're busy, they couldn't make it." I'm like, okay, probably, it is what it is. But probably too makes you wonder, oh, probably Elliot probably told her that other friends were coming, and in reality, they were never going to come, which is the vibe I'm getting. So, yeah, because I felt like for me, the romance could have been left out because Rose is dealing, with a lot of stuff with ICE, with her mom, and all that stuff. And when you add the romance to it, it creates another layer of problems that, she's going with. And I just felt that when they kissed, her and Elliot, towards the end before her last performance, it came out of nowhere. I just wish that if the romance was so crucial. That could have been more fleshed out more, because maybe Elliot could have said, "Oh, I like you, Rose," but then Rose is too preoccupied to notice because she's dealing with her own problems. But that's my opinion on it. Uh, Speaking of ice, they just came out of nowhere when they arrived at the Broken Spoke, because it makes you wonder, like, did they get the heads up that there were some illegal citizens residing at Broken Spoke, or was it just like a random search? I don't know. Because also too, were they looking for anyone particular? Were they looking for Rose, or were they looking for Jose, who's a co-worker at the bar because he's also a legal citizen? So I just felt that could have been more clear, but it just seems like it was random because they weren't looking for anyone in particular. That's the vibe that I'm getting with that scene in particular. Also, too, when Elliot creates fake ID for Rose, that ID is laughable because usually for official IDs, the photo you look straight at the camera with no reaction. But with the photo here, it's like she's looking off to the side, kind of smiley, and I'm just like, that's not convincing at all. But like the worst part of it is that through that photo, she gets accepted into the bar. So I thought that was hilarious. Like they could have done a better job making it more convincing, even though clearly she's underage. And lastly, too, with the shaky cam, when that's used when Rose is running into the field when Priscilla is taken into custody. For me, like I'm not a big fan of shaky cam unless if there is like if it's used crucially or in moderation. I don't know. I just felt like with the shaky cam here could not have been used because probably they wanted to use it to literally show that with Rose and Priscilla, their world is crumbling down. Or it could have just been a stylistic choice. I'm not sure, but I felt like the film with the camera work could have been more static with that scene, but that's just my opinion. So let's get into trivia, some fun facts. So usually I gather the fun facts from IMDb, but there was barely anything on IMDb for this movie because it mentions that with Eva Noblezada and with the actress that plays Gail, apparently they played the same role on Broadway at different times. I mean, which is nice, but doesn't relate to this movie. So I ended up finding this article on Variety. Going to just a second. And essentially, the director is interviewed, and let's just go through it. I'll share a link to the article in the description for you guys to check out. So apparently, um, the headline says, "Oh, how Marinaire inspired the director to keep going." So here is what I gathered from this interview. So apparently, the film took over 15 years to make. So here's what she says. I came up with a story over 15 years ago. I hadn't made a movie when I started writing it, but it was loosely based on my experience growing up in Lubbock, Texas. It was always about immigration, which is something that I think people that watch the film might think it's a reaction to current politics. But it's always been an issue, and it's certainly one for the Filipino community in this country, so it was just very close to me. And then she goes on to say apparently that she reworked a script about a white guy going to India and had no relationship to that, and I guess she changed it to how it is in the movie. And then she also mentioned that she was at Toronto Film Festival. She supported Marinaire's A Reluctant Fundamentalist film. And during her Q&A, I guess she mentioned that making these films about with American cast, no one was making films with South Asian cast, and said, if I don't do it, then it will never get made, and that's what motivated Diane to make this movie. Also, too, because they asked, "Oh, why did you choose country music to be the heartbeat of the film?" So apparently, the director says that yeah, she she didn't grow up, I guess, listening to country music. But I guess that came up when she was working on the script because she says here, I thought, what if this girl loved Texas and country music? It would be a great starting point for the character. There's something about pairing country music in films that's deeply cinematic. I was trying to take the elements of country songs, such as authenticity, simplicity, and melancholy, to turn that into movie. What else? And then lastly, she was asked, what do you hope people get from the film? She says, I hope people come and see the film with an open mind because it sheds light on the undocumented experience. There's been a great deal of maligning in the last 4 years, and I hope this allows people to see the humanity of what happens when families get separated, and I hope it restores dignity of the immigrant experience. Cinema is one medium that has the power to change people's hearts and minds, and I hope people use the film to understand the immigrant experience and how it impacts the children who have no say in the matter. That's interesting. So, as I said, yeah, if you want to check out this interview, it'll be available in the description. So, lastly, I usually ask this question, should this movie be rediscovered? And I say absolutely yes, because I enjoyed, yeah, like it was going for low key with the music, and I like with the music because with country music, it likes to tell a story. And yeah, the performances were great. I mean, sure, like some could argue that the story is basic or paper thin and all that stuff, but for me, I didn't mind it. So, I mean, and in terms of like the politics of the movie, I didn't mind it in this case because it wasn't too like in your face on it, if that makes sense. But yeah, I would say go check it out wherever it's available to you. So that pretty much concludes this episode of the podcast. So you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Linktree at Nomfanelo. You can find the podcast on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Linktree at RD Movies Pod. For those of you that listen on Spotify, you could answer the featured question and poll and also rate the podcast. If you listen to it on Apple Podcasts, you can rate the podcast and leave a review, which will be great for the algorithm. And you could submit questions, comments, and suggestions by email, which is rediscoveredmovies@gmail.com. Or you can send a short voice message on Spotify for podcasters at RD Movies Pod to be featured on the after show, which will air after the season finale. So I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the podcast, and I'll catch you on the next one.